In a time of endless media content, political correctness and fake news and chaos cried out for heroes. Two men were chosen, a mighty force forged in the heat of hilarity. The crack, the banter, the lack of negative waves. Their podcast would change the world.
And instead they got two absolute idiots, one whose crippling narcissism will inevitably lead to someone choking him to death, the other his obsession with Stone Cold Steve Austin ended in multiple restraining orders and a broken neck, not his own. No, this isn't the number one podcast in the country, yet. It's Jack and Sean on You Ain't Heard Nothing Yet.
Hello, how's the form? What is the crack and how are we getting on? Yes, the lovely man that is sitting opposite me is a wild Sean Skews.
And there's a Jack Donnelly on the opposite side of the desk.
There is indeed, and you're listening to Jack and Sean on You Ain't Heard Nothing Yet. What is the crack with us all today? How are we getting on? Yes, myself and Sean are here to do our usuals, to talk our usual nonsensical banter.
Banter.
Indeed,
I like the word
indeed.
banter.
Do you like the word banter?
Well, I like the word banter in terms of like banter, but you know, like when people are like, that's great banter.
So much overused.
Yeah, like crack. Banter's replaced crack, and I don't like it.
Aye,
Yeah.
I have to say.
Same way sesh has replaced rip.
I like rip. We're going.
Yeah, I
on
like rip, but sesh is replaced.
No, yeah, a session.
Yeah, but that's different.
Okay. We're going on the rip. We're going on the sesh. Aye.
Make seshes rip again. Make banters crack again. Make banter crack again.
So what's crack this week, Sean?
Not a lot. I've seen some things. I've read some stuff. There's an astoundingly good album that I've been starting to listen to this week. What is in the top of your list?
Did you see that Tic Tac and Coca-Cola are doing a collaboration?
Like the mint?
The mint, as in like the mint that you would have got. So I always remember like getting Tic Tacs when I was younger, right? And you had the white ones, which had the initial nice taste, but roasted the mouth off you, right? And then you had obviously the green and the orange ones, right? And they were nice. You know, the green was like a limey colour, and the orange were like an orangey colour. You know, but Coca-Cola and Tic Tac are doing a collaboration.
It's a very contentious colours.
Hey, literally in my head, I was like, were the executives of Tic Tac Irish?
Me.
You know,
Are Tic Tacs involved?
Have they been called to an inquiry?
Not yet.
Subpoenaed on the run.
Did Tic Tac get letters?
Tic Tac and Coke are doing a collaboration, and it's pretty much, you know, Coke branding on Tic Tacs, right? So
this is Coca-Cola.
This is Coke,
like the drug.
No, this is Coca-Cola. You know, and you know, I just was thinking to myself, you know, how do you get the, you know, is it like a lukewarm version of like minty fresh taste with also you can scrub the streets and take blood off the streets, because they do that with Coca-Cola in the States.
Did Coca-Cola put there when they sponsored those like Colombian death squads in 2004? Allegedly.
Allegedly. But yeah, I thought it was very, very strange. It was a very, very strange collaboration. I can see like, you know, Coke and like, you know, a burger or fast food chain or something like that. There's something that complements it. But
are they going to taste it like Coke?
I don't know. I assume so. Like there's going to be like some like, you know, new flavour.
Or I wonder, would they be like, you know, like them pods you get for your washing or your like, you know, washing machine?
Just fire them in
and have like stuff in them. Would it be like a hard Tic Tac with Coca-Cola inside and like burst in your mouth? Do you remember you got them chewing gum, you know, like juicy gum?
Oh yeah, Hubba Bubba.
Is that where the Hubba Bubba?
I think they're called Hubba Bubba.
You bite into them and they like explode.
There are other chewing gums available.
No, and they'd explode in your mouth.
Yes.
And then you get a chewing gum too.
Do you have many things explode in your mouth?
But Coke and Tic Tac, Coke and Oreos would have been a good one. Do you ever see those videos?
No.
Where people like put Oreos in like a bottle of Coke and they like react in such a way.
Mentos?
Mentos, what I say.
Oreos? The biscuit.
You'd really struggle to get an Oreo in that tiny bottle.
I was going to say, would you crush the Oreo up? Like
maybe that's why it's never worked when I tried it.
Just a real soggy fucking Coke.
Why is this not fizzing up? Yeah, Mentos, that would have been a good one.
Yeah.
You like eat it and then it maybe just fizzes out and you just start like projectile like fire and the like fizz. Like
your doll Little Britain, like
yeah.
We could be advertising executives for Coke, I think.
Yeah, I think we've just I think like Coca-Cola.
Well, it's the most we might have been in university when we mixed Coke with vodka.
And that was a rip. But I think we've just perfectly summed up the Coca-Cola and Tic Tac PR moves in between the contentious colours and the drug associations, and you know, I think I think letters will be in the post, I'm sure, whether they're job offers or something else. I don't know.
Yeah. Call in our solicitors. So yeah, I thought that was a bit mad. Do you know what I also seen during the week as well? Okay, Sean, are you a fan of Disney film?
I'm a fan of Disney films. I was in Disneyland a few weeks ago.
You were in Disneyland? I forgot all about that. Who did you see and who did you meet? We were talking about that in the last show, weren't we, actually? We made a touch.
We didn't mention it. We're talking about Kingdom Hearts stuff.
Oh, okay.
I didn't meet any of them because you have to queue to meet them.
What? This is just a walkabout.
Yeah.
Sorry, is this false advertising? You ever seen the advertisements where like the really
child like runs up and it's like, oh, Mickey, and Mickey's like, yeah, you know, they're like a queue, like a meet and greet. You know, like when you go to like a gig and you pay for a meet and greet ticket, and it's like that. And I swear to God, they all must be unionised except for Daisy Duck, because like
why?
So all of these wee places where they stand and you queue to meet them, and we were there we were there a whole day, basically from like 9 to 9, and you walked around and
sounds fun.
It was good. And you know, Mickey would be there, and then you'd come around later to, you know, going somewhere, walking past, and Goofy would be there, or you'd see Donald Duck and he'd be replaced by somebody, a Minnie Mouse or whatever. But Daisy Duck was there all day. Daisy Duck was there from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. She was shaking kids' hands and taking photos of babies and all this, and I don't know if she's got...
What's the thing about quality here, Sean? We're 2019.
I know, but
working 12-hour shifts there,
maybe she just hasn't paid her union dues. She's getting unfair working hours, unfair working environment.
I was going to say, yeah, and those suits completely roasted and toasted, like, you know?
Yeah, it was a very warm day.
Yeah?
But, yeah.
Imagine vomiting in one of those suits. Imagine being on the rip the night before and imagine being on the rip the night before, like, and having to sit and like get pure roasted, like, you know what I mean?
It'd be a struggle. And then kids call. Although that's what I said, if you're going to do one of those jobs, it's probably because you like kids and stuff, you know, you're not going to be doing it. And
no, if you don't like children.
You know, it's not like doing like dressing up as Woody in a shitty costume and like a play gym in Bangor. You know, it's like this is the real deal.
The real McCoy.
But what about Disney? What's the...
So yeah, Disney are creating their new streaming service that's due to come in November here at some stage, and they're sending a competition. They're looking for people. They're going to pay them $1,000 to sit for 30 days and watch 30 Disney films. Right? I think it was like handy enough. Like, do you know what I mean? There is that many Disney films. Disney have worked across all different spectrums, even like Pirates of the Caribbean is Disney. We're not just thinking about cartoons here, for God's sake. But you know what I was thinking? Like, do you have a favourite Disney film?
Do I have a favourite Disney film? Oh, you're putting me on the spot. Are we counting like Pixar and stuff?
Do Pixar own Disney?
Disney own Pixar.
Or Disney own Pixar?
Like see, Toy Story and Frozen and stuff. Those are
I would say I
don't know. The Fox and the Hound, Disney.
The Fox and the Hound is Disney.
Fox and the Hound's a bad job.
I like the Fox and the Hound.
I know it's a bad job.
Oh, it is.
It's a really bad job.
It's sad.
Toy Story 3. They're all like. There's not a Disney film that isn't a bad job.
Oh, there's complete tragedy in all those.
Like, you know, there's never just a happy one. But no, I don't know.
Well, I was just thinking about it, right? So if you took Frozen there, for example, Frozen was a massive hit. I actually never seen Frozen. I've seen Let It Go, Let It Go. Obviously, as you can hear, guys, I'll not be signing a record deal any stage again. But I thought to myself, if Frozen was created in the north, in Northern Ireland, you know, it wouldn't be called Frozen, called Baltic. It wouldn't, or you know,
Foundered,
hey, or Frostbite.
Where did he go?
Where did he go? Yeah. And then I was thinking to myself, you know the song Frozen, Let It Go, Let It Go. Where is it? Elsa. Elsa stands in, you know, her lovely dress, and she's, you know, I don't know whether she's letting go about, you know, like, you know, her time at university or her virginity or whatever she's talking about. I don't know.
Clearly haven't seen this film.
No, I really haven't. But I was thinking, again, if you put it into, like, you know, a context for here, you know, it wouldn't be Let It Go, let me go, as some girl roars with a fistful of her mates her outside Robinson's Saturday night. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's, you know,
it's the way it's gonna go.
It is the way it's gonna go, you know. And then I was thinking as well, what other great films were there? Or like, there's been a lot of remakes. So we see remakes like Aladdin, where Will Smith played the genie.
He did.
And we obviously seen, you know, took over the role from the fantastic Robin Williams. Right. And I was thinking as well, you know, like, I could play the genie, no problem. You know, just give me a wee bit of a rub and I'll come out all over the place, no problem. Do you know what I mean?
You don't get 3 goes though. It's just one and done.
It's just one and done. Like, you know, the grand finale here, like grand finale and beginning. You know.
Did you apply for this job because you misunderstand all these films on a fundamental level like this?
I was going to bring my own spin on it, Sean.
You're going to sit down and go to Frozen like, hang on, this is what I thought this was about.
Come on here, lads. This wasn't what it is.
What other Disney films would you look forward to watching on this? You got this role.
Lion King, definitely. Do you know what I mean? Have you seen the remake?
I have.
So Elton John, funny enough, actually came out and said that he was pretty disappointed with it, right? And, you know, he didn't really fully enjoy the tunes, and like he said, it couldn't beat the original. And with anything, it's hard to beat the original. But I thought to myself, well, this has really come full circle. You know what I mean? The circle. Again, not going to get a record deal at any stage.
Well, then, is this a circle of life now with these Disney remakes, though? They, like, remake them and people complain they're not as good, and then they start to, like, they're going to be remade again in, like, 20 years. This is just the circle of Disney making money off the same, like,
without a shadow of a doubt. Without a shadow of a doubt. Although I love the Jungle Book. Jungle Book's Disney, isn't it?
It is. They remade that, too.
I really like that. Actually, I watched that on the plane going to Zambia once.
Your mate is Baloo, isn't he?
Yes. He is. It's so brilliant.
I've not seen it.
He's very, very good as Baloo. And then I was thinking, what other films we like, and I thought... we have The Little Mermaid, right? Now, right, I have to ask you a question, Sean. Right?
Oh, no.
This might be a little bit controversial, okay?
Okay.
But there's a lot of Disney princesses.
There are.
A lot of them are pretty, how would one say, pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty hot. Like, smoking.
Okay, Jack, these are drawings.
What's that?
These are drawings.
Yeah, well, do you know, there is a section on Pornhub called Anime, Sean.
Okay.
But, not that I would know. But, I was thinking, do you think, is there any of them that really stand out to you, Sean?
Not off the top of my head, but I feel like you have. Do you have a shrine?
I don't have a shrine.
I think you have a shrine.
I don't have a shrine. I just think that some of them are very, very attractive ladies.
Okay.
Do you know
like who?
Well, The Little Mermaid for one.
Ariel.
Ariel.
Is she of age?
What's that?
Is she of age?
Is she of age? What a question to ask, for God's sake. Sean, that shows
What is legal age for a fish?
You know what, Sean? I'd be into it.
She's half fish. How would that even...
She's half fish, but when she comes on land, she gets a nice pair of legs.
She does, but then she can't talk. Is this the only reason? Is this...
See, Sean, I've got it sorted here.
Doesn't she?
She loses her voice, and can you imagine life would be fantastic? You know what I mean? She wouldn't be roaring and screaming at you. It'd be brilliant. You know what I mean? I could hear the sound of my own voice all the time.
I think that's all you hear all the time anyway.
Inner monologue. But
I fully believe we record these. My mic isn't turned on anyway.
Say it, nothing. But no, this film was made in 1989. So right, if you think about it, 89, 1, 10, she'd be like 30 now, and I'm 24. It's all good. It's all good.
There's still the fish issue to overcome.
There's still the fish issue. Macron's wife is like older than he is, and he's a world leader.
Fish.
She's an alien.
The Shape of Water is actually a biopic. What else has happened recently? I will try and steer away from Jack and his fish fantasy. Fortnite went down there a while ago.
It did.
The world came to a standstill, grinding halt.
It's funny though, Sean, like we're having a thing at the moment, and about climate change. It's obviously a massive thing in the news. Like, you can't have a news cycle without it. It's been shared constantly on social media and such things. And I was like, how big is climate change now? The climate change has rocked our video game universe. Do you know what I mean? Then an asteroid comes in and black hole. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's mad.
It's mad.
You know?
And I'm sure in the same sense as, what do you call her? Greta Thunberg.
Yes.
She was like, what she said, she accused the UN, you've taken away my dreams, you've taken away my future. I said there was 2 million people with the same response when it came up, like, Fortnite is unavailable.
Do you just imagine like some lad sitting in his bedroom playing it with like whoever across the world, and he's like just about to win his first match? No,
that's my excuse. That's why I've never won a match. Knock some shit.
Did you see that Pornhub got a little bit of a spike for those 2 days?
I'd say so. It was probably a very parallel as Fortnite came back online, then went back offline.
Yeah.
I wonder were they searching Fortnite stuff, or was it?
Oh, I suppose.
Or was it just you searching Little Mermaid?
No comment.
What else? Have you been watching anything new or listening to anything? Or?
Do you see the Breaking Bad movie?
I still have not seen the Breaking Bad.
Okay, well then we will not talk about that.
We will be doing an in-depth discussion once I watch that goddamn movie.
Yeah.
There's a new album out this week that I've been listening to.
Okay.
Well, it's out. It's just out, and I've got to listen about the first half of it. So far, it's very good.
Who is it?
It's by a group called Clipping.
Clipping?
They're like an experimental hip hop group.
Okay, so it's not a group about, or it's not a group about professional gardeners with hedge cutters. No.
Not yet. There's 11 songs in the album. I've listened to the first 5, and that vibe hasn't really come through yet. But if it does, I'll report back and let you know.
Thank you.
It's pretty good. It's like noise hip hop. It's a lot of samples of weird stuff.
Right.
And the weirdest thing I've found. Do you ever like read about something, and you're like, why am I the only person who doesn't get this?
Okay.
So the last track on the album is called Piano Burning. It's 15 minutes long.
Piano burning?
It is the audio of a piano being set on fire and burning.
Right.
So then I started reading around it, and this lady has written a composition called Piano Burning, where she performs it, like goes to different like unis and stuff and performs piano burning. It just burns a piano, and everybody's like, woo! And I watched videos of this, and like 3 or 4 different videos on YouTube, and I was like, what am I missing?
So
what am I missing? What, like,
how did you get through the health and safety there? Like,
and then I was like, oh, maybe the strings like burn or pull or something, and it like, you know, but no, that really happened. But no, yeah, I'm listening to that album. Hopefully get a few more listens, and maybe.
Does it have any like famous people on it, or are they standalone in themselves, or what's the
main rapper? He was in the original Broadway cast of Hamilton. Mm-hmm. So as you can imagine, that's how I came across these guys.
Alexander Hamilton.
They are very, very divorced from Hamilton.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, but no, we'll come back to it. I'm just thought I'd flag it. It's something I thought it was really cool and really interesting. What's the album called? There Existed an Addiction to Blood. It's very good.
Are they vampires?
No, but a lot of their stuff's very dark and very grim. This album kind of is like a concept horror album, it seems, from what I've got so far.
What do you mean by concept horror?
Like, one track's called Blood of the Fang, and is very like grim, and like, imagine it's the kind of music you could set to like Jason Voorhees slowly stalking you. Or there's one called Nothing Is Safe, which seems to be telling the story of this guy getting hunted down.
Right.
So it is very grim and dark, but it's really cool. So
okay.
Maybe once I get a bit of a deeper dive in it, we can come back and explore that further. But yeah, it's strange. They've released the album on cassette, and the older, you see the big vinyls, they've released it on the smaller vinyls. The little ones you don't really see people use, which I thought was strange. It's kind of like seems to be a new thing. 1975 did it too, I think, with their last album. Who else? Someone else did it. Eminem. All these people are doing it with like cassette tapes now. Mm-hmm. It's like a vintage thing, but I would have thought that sort of stuff would have been out of date, obsolete. Well, just past their prime, sort of thing.
You see, the cassette thing has like that old retro novelty. So I think Billie Eilish has done it recently. Eminem has done it, and I suppose it's like another form. It's things coming full circle, right?
Mm-hmm. Circle of life again.
Elton, if you need any backing on anything, just do hit me up now. But yeah, it's strange because cassette tapes, like records, for example, records had this massive wave for ages, and then of course CDs came out, MP3s, downloading such things. Like, well, who wants records? And they've come completely full circle. They're a very, very valuable thing now to be sought after.
Mm-hmm. And then I suppose on that, is there anything else you can think of like that has kind of faded away, or isn't or is more prominent or less prominent than it used to be?
Funny enough, actually, this is one, right? So for anybody who doesn't know me, my ma's a nurse, right? And she was telling me actually very, very recently about pagers, right? So pagers are something that you see in like any 90s movie, right?
Yeah.
You see them in loads of different movies. They're an old thing, like pagers to remind you for certain events and such things. But now that we have like massive phone technology and such things, we don't need that, right? So pagers actually are still used in the NHS. There will be until 2021. And the reason why is because, in hospital rooms, they block out phone signal. So, like when a doctor's been paged or a nurse has been paged to come and, like emergency or something, like say an A&E, like come in and like, look at this patient or whatever. And they have pagers, still have pagers to contact them.
Right.
Now they're talking about setting up another form. My ma calls it a bleep. So it's a bleep where like something goes wrong in the ward and she has to run and do whatever. But I thought it was pretty strange, the old pager thing.
I think fax machines, I used to work in the office, and we had to fax certain documents. And this is like 2018, 17, that are like certain sensitive documents or that aren't allowed to like be emailed or whatever. We had to like fax them.
Right.
And it was one of those things where once people start talking about, go fax that, I was like, am I on Quantum Leap? Can I not just email this?
What's happening here?
What else is obsolete?
Checks. Think of checks.
Yeah, do you remember checks?
Like I have a checkbook, right? And I would still and I know people who would still pay in check. So small businesses pay in check. Mm-hmm. You have like the vulnerable people who maybe can't get out, or elderly people still would pay in check. Do you know what I mean?
The lottery, they pay in giant unwieldy check.
How are you going to cash that thing? Do you know?
Do you think you actually cash it, or is that just for the show?
Well, I mean, put it like this: I wouldn't want to be losing it.
No.
Do you know what I mean?
Imagine folding that up and putting it in your back pocket.
You'd know all about it. You think about it like climate change, lads. Come on here. Do you know? Just do me an old transaction into the bank account, like.
Yeah. Or
you wake up after a week's rip. Oh my God! Where did all the money go to?
Contactless. All of it's
but yeah, in the US,
radio.
Exactly.
A lot of people, I'm sure, would have said radio was obsolete, and now look at us. We're big time podcasters.
Indeed.
The future of radio.
Yeah, it's funny actually because the radio thing where, you know, people used to sit around, that iconic, you know, of the mother knitting and the father reading the paper and the children playing at their feet, where everybody would have heard the news or the radio stuff. Obviously, you know, you've like the War of the Worlds thing and all the different things with radio. And then when TV came out, everybody was like, oh, you know, it's going to die. Video killed the radio star. But it didn't, because obviously we've come full circle. Podcasts are a massive, massive thing now. Literally what you are listening to. Please. So yeah, it's been a massive thing that's come around. Think as well of, this is a funny one actually, Tamagotchi.
Tamagotchi?
Do you remember Tamagotchi?
I remember Tamagotchi. Could never get a wee so-and-so to stay alive.
No. They released...
Mostly because I forgot, and then you'd remember like 3 days later and you'd be like, oh, he's dead.
They were released in 1986, I believe. And, but think about this though, right? Now, Tamagotchi, I remember having them like ages ago, and I thought they were something that is completely dead. There's been 6 million sold between 2010 and 2017.
6 million?
6 million.
Right.
Madness, absolute madness. They released a new version in 2018, and
are these like actual? Is it, like, would they not move that shit to like an iPhone or an app?
You would think, but what they've done now, Sean, is they have upgraded it, right? So there's a new version that was released in 2018, and people now chat on online forums. Tamagotchis can now get married, so you can have an arranged marriage for your Tamagotchi.
Yeah, I was going to say, did Tamagotchi get a say in this?
You know what, Sean? I don't think so.
Where's my Tamagotchi right?
Where's the equality to Tamagotchi rights? They have tributes to them dying. So you imagine a funeral. I don't know why that was attempted Latin there. And you know, or like, what do they do? Like when a Tamagotchi dies, they throw out the white smoke. Do you know what I mean?
Tamagotchis die of old age.
Well, in this, I don't know, because anyone I ever had that would never like lasted long enough. But then
Tamagotchis get sick.
Oh, they do.
Tamagotchis fight each other. They kill each other.
Oh, they have babies. They're now sleeping.
Do Tamagotchis have domestic abuse?
I don't know.
I have a lot of questions. Like, once you introduce the idea of Tamagotchis getting married and having funerals, like, where does it?
Yeah, where do we end here?
Do they have kids?
But they have kids, yes, and people talk on online forums, and discuss the Tamagotchi world.
I wonder what the oldest Tamagotchi was.
He lived to 103.
Whoa! I'm doing some Tamagotchi research here. Tamagotchi have, you know, like dog years,
right?
You have Tama years,
right?
So apparently the oldest Tamagotchi was 145 Tama years, whatever that means.
Holy Lord!
This guy's Tamagotchi got married when he was 5. I'm not liking this. Is the dark side of Tamagotchis.
Yeah.
I'm getting out of that part of it.
We are gonna now start the Tamagotchi for Equality party. With myself and Sean as the figurehead and our glorious leader, Tamagotchi King.
King Tamagotchi.
So yeah, Sean, that's our weekly roundup of what we've seen this week.
Haven't seen any Tamagotchis. I'm gonna have to get a What if we get a Tamagotchi? What if we buy a Tamagotchi?
We'll buy a Tamagotchi.
Well, of course we buy a Tamagotchi because we are the Tamagotchi Equality Party.
Indeed.
And we will.
We'll at least need a Tamagotchi in the party, like.
So we will liberate Tamagotchi. But yeah, that's really it. That is the wild and wonderful things we have been looking at this week.
Very true indeed. Okay, folks, well, stick around because we will be right back after these messages. And we are back in the room once again. Yes, you're here with Jack and Sean and you ain't heard nothing yet. We're going to be chatting about probably one of the biggest fiends in comic history. He's a scary dude. He's also a funny dude. I might be...
We're talking about the Joker. I thought this wasn't like an autobiography,
He's creeped a lot of people out in the past. He has been a cartoon. He's been in comics. He has been in real life characters. So we're going to be chatting about the character, Batman's biggest foe. We're going to be chatting about his nemesis. Who are we chatting about, Sean?
Talking about the Joker.
Sorry, that was just me doing a Joker voice.
No,
that was literally just like a... You know what? I can do a more... I used to be able to do a more cackly one because of smoke now. Like it's you know...
I'm sure, yeah, that's the biggest impact smoking had in your life, yeah.
This smoking or non-smoking.
Yeah, so I suppose in relation to the film that came out very recently, we're going to just talk about how the character has evolved over the years, how there's like different adaptations, and how that has led to this seemingly what looks to be like an Oscar contender film adaptation.
Does.
His own standalone film there, just recently released with Joaquin Phoenix in the lead role. What do you think of the film? You saw it a few days ago.
So Joaquin Phoenix Phoenix, is that he?
Yeah, Joaquin.
Joaquin. I never can pronounce probably Joaquin, as he cannot pronounce everything, as anybody will know in these shows.
As we saw with all those names in the last bit.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought that it showed very much of an underdog, of somebody that had nothing. The story goes on and you hear more about his mother and the impact of what's true and what's not true. There's a massive thing in this film about what's real and what's not real. Mental deterioration, and how sort of when the world can back you into a corner, when you think everything's sort of fucking you about, it really comes into a situation where you can do something and people can latch on to it. It's come under a lot of stick and a lot of pressure because of the current protests that are going on across the world. We take Hong Kong for example, or what's happening with the Brexit shit at the moment. When I say Brexit shite, I mean shit. And the whole protest and stuff definitely happen here in the north and Northern Ireland.
Right sort of concerns that might, the film might inspire some sort of, I think there was fears of mass shootings.
Mass shootings, yeah. Well, there's already fucking mass shootings in America. Do you know what I mean? I thoroughly enjoyed it. I definitely think it's very much a one-man show. He drives it and he definitely carries it. I think that his body, the way he's an incredibly skinny man in it. We see bruising on his body. We definitely see what I would describe as a living skeleton. There's a lot of the movie where he's topless, where he's maybe sitting on a bench, doing the laces on his boots or his shoes, or he's sitting on a sofa with just his his trousers on or whatever, and you can see that there's nothing to him. There's not a pick to him. That is an element of obviously mental illness and certain mental illnesses that come about it. There's definitely themes of addiction as well. He chain smokes constantly. The laugh is brilliant. It's a great idea. It's a really great idea that it just comes out. But it sees the laugh, you see, the thing that sort of hampers him, it becomes almost the catalyst for how he turns, in my opinion. A certain scene in a train.
It causes, it's ironically or suitably or whatever, it is this issue, disease he has, if it's even real, it causes him to just laugh very inappropriate moments, and it's a very sort of Joker-esque cackle, the one that you can't do anymore.
No.
And it causes moments that lead him to take certain actions that ultimately lead to him becoming the eponymous Joker.
Did you like it?
I liked it. I think you hit the nail on the head with a lot of what you said. I think it is a one-man show. Joaquin Phoenix's performance is fantastic. It's not an overly. I don't think it's an overly well. Not that it's badly directed. I just don't think the direction's what anybody's going for. But I think the Oscars, if it's nominated or wins any Oscars, it'll be for his performance.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt.
The question I have about it, I think it would serve a lot of rewatches. I think there's definitely a lot of finer details.
There's wee eggs in there, like.
Certainly around details of what's real and what's not real. Because the film, again, we'll try and avoid spoilers as much as possible. The film outlines certain things that are probably all in the main character, when Joaquin Phoenix's character Arthur Fleck, in his head. But then it kind of sets up this is a possibility, so how much of what else we see is real or isn't real?
Yeah, very much unreliability of, as you say, what is real and what's not real, and what we can, because we're seeing it through his eyes, we don't know what is real or what's not real. Do you know?
I think what sums up sort of in my head the quality of the performance is, you talk about people acting, it never felt like he was acting, it felt like he was reacting, like he was that person living that life, reacting to the world and the characters around him, rather than Joaquin Phoenix giving a performance. He was Arthur Fleck living in this world. I like,
yeah.
Which I thought was very good. He exists as that character. I didn't think the rest of the film was lacking. It was as even the promotion has solely relied on Joaquin Phoenix and the lengths he's went to for this role and how invested he was. There's an early Oscar buzz and then maybe a best lead actor nomination. What are your thoughts on that? I know that Academy is usually hesitant to give it to sort of comic book films, but then I suppose that speaks to a larger conversation. Is this a comic book film? Did it need to be a Joker film? Could it have been some film about a feeling comedian who struggles, or would anybody have seen it if it wasn't? I
think that is the last question is brilliant, and I think the reason being is because in the current climate, right? In the current climate of what we've got people acting out massively. We look at mass shootings in America. We look at what's going on in Hong Kong, which is like injustices and different things happening across the world, protests happening across the world. We've got climate change and all the rest. Take it being the Joker out of it, right? Take the failing comedian role, and take the way that the things that happen in the latter part of the movie and how shit hits the massive fan. I think that it fits in brilliantly with our today's context in 2019 in the society that we're in. I think that putting it as the Joker being Batman's greatest foe, Batman being one of the greatest superheroes ever, and I'm not a comic book fan, you know that. Listeners will understand, I don't like comics, I don't like superheroes, I like their villains. Do you know? And Joker's the best one, and because they've used that as a gaze, because Joker over the past number of years, we've definitely seen him resurge, which we'll talk about later. Heath Ledger, Jared Leto. We're going to chat about it a wee bit later on, but in that, you know what you've done. I think you've killed two birds with one stone. And you've taken the Joker, and you've also taken the current climate and the way we are at the moment, the mob mentality, society and such things, and you've married the two together. I think, as you said, it's definitely a one-man show. The both of us have said that, and I think what do you call him?
The performance was good, but it was just the nature of the film.
Yeah, it was the nature of the film. I didn't think De Niro was that.
See, it ties in.
Do you know?
De Niro was in another film. I can't remember the name of it. Is it The Last Comedian or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a very similar plot.
Yeah.
In terms of comedian failing and tries to act out and sort of things.
Okay.
So I think it was maybe a callback to that or stuff like that. I think De Niro also suits as sort of like an elder statesman sort of for that sort of role.
Yeah,
I get what you mean. Maybe it didn't need to be someone of De Niro's caliber, but yeah.
Yeah, I think having De Niro there added a little bit of weight to it. I thought as well though, there's very much a case where De Niro, see, I'm trying not to say it without giving stuff away, that something happens in the film where what De Niro does can be seen as like pretty like hateful enough, but it's hateful enough because we know what the mental illnesses that Phoenix's character has. Yeah. But in a general context, like somebody gets up to give a speech and messes it up, and it hits social media and everybody laughs at this person, right? We don't know that person, when that person got up initially to say that speech, for example, we didn't know that person had a speech impediment. We don't know that person can't talk in crowds. We didn't know that person suffers from anxiety. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So when it's taken into that context of the way the Joker is and how that is sort of spun on through, I mean, it's pulls in different directions. The film definitely does. As for the Batman's Joker character, I think it's brilliant. I think at the very, very end, now, without again giving away the very, very last scene, right? The very last scene, he's been chased by
people.
He's been chased by people. That to me is that I was watching that. It's comic book. Yeah. It's back and forth. That's exactly what it is. Scooby-Doo. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. I think that married that reality of like just it being just a film, not a cartoon or even a superhero film or even an origins film before. You can definitely remove it from that, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And what do you think? Do you think he'll get nominated? Will he win an Oscar?
The way he gets on in it, like the method acting is a big pull. So I would say he'll be nominated. Like whether he win it or not is a different story.
Especially after last year, I think the Academy's more open to the more blockbuster comic book films. Black Panther won one last year.
Not if Scorsese was on the. A lot of Scorsese was on the panel.
Or Ford Coppola has come out with similar statements there as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was we liked the film. It was like fun. We liked the characters. He's one of my personal favourite characters. Some of my favourite comic book stories revolve around the Joker. And our thoughts on the new Joaquin Phoenix film.
It is indeed, folks. Okay, well, we will indeed.
A few moments after some.
You were listening to an album, Sean, you want to tell me about?
Yeah, I want to just talk about around this time last year. Jack, do you know I went to see Hamilton?
Alexander Hamilton.
Is that copyright?
That probably is true, to be fair. Well, we seen it together once, and then you've seen it 2, 3, or how many other times?
I've seen it twice, counting the times that way.
Oh, okay.
And off the back of that, of interest in the Broadway production, there's a guy, David Diggs, who played Lafayette in the original production, and I came across a hip hop group he's in called Clipping. Mm-hmm. And they released their new album a few weeks ago. It's called There Existed an Addiction to Blood. Clearly one for the Christmas number one.
I was going to say vampires.
Vampires, yeah. It's like a.
It was Halloween, very recently there. So it like what's the story there? So, I want to suck your blood.
Yeah. So it's essentially the title's taken from a 1970s film called Ganja and Hess.
Sorry, Ganja and Hess? Sounds like my type of show.
Which is a film about an African American couple who, it's like, I think it's meant to be like a, what's the word? Not a parody, like a metaphor.
Okay.
For like addiction, and they're vampires, how they deal with their addiction to blood and stuff.
I'm addicted to you.
And the album is meant to be, they did a previous album called Splendor and Misery. It was like a sci-fi concept album.
Okay.
And this album is like a horror concept album. So it's meant to be very thematically and in terms of like, you know, episodic narrative about just like small horror stories. It has aspects of, well, we'll look back and talk about the group, just a little background. So the group's from California. It's a trio. It's made up of David Diggs of Hamilton, a guy called William Huston and Jonathan Snipes both produced. David's the vocalist. They all met each other. I think David knew one of them from like childhood, and then I think the other two were college friends and stuff like that.
Right.
And in 2013 they released a mixtape called Mid City, then released their debut album in 2014, Splendor and Misery in 2016, and now this is their next full album, which was released there very recently. The group's characterised as kind of like experimental hip hop with influences of like noise music.
What do you mean by noise music?
So a lot of their songs feature like when I say samples, I mean samples from other songs, and music that has been made via sounds. So like maybe metal tools clanking together.
Okay.
I think they're working on a new song that features samples of them screaming underwater.
Okay.
Stuff like that.
Funny now that you mentioned that, right? They're right. You've heard of this now. The band that I'm now going to talk about, or just jump in there. A brief digression is light years different from what you. The Backstreet Boys.
All right.
We all know the Backstreet Boys, right? So part of the Backstreet Boys have a song called "The Call."
Okay.
And one of their members, I'm gonna definitely pronounce the song Huey, Howie.
I'd say that's Howie.
Howie. There's like I can't read, and and his second name.
Very defensive.
Do Rough, Doroughh.
Yes.
So apparently when they were recording this song called "The Call," right, and there's a partner where it goes dun dun dun, right, and apparently the third dun in the dun 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 was they were recording it and he let a massive rip, a massive fart, like I mean a massive fart
Right.
when they were in the studio, right. One of his bandmates was one of his bandmates a few years ago was been interviewed, and he released this and he was like, you know, Howie was singing so loud, he was giving it his all, and then this just like explosion came out, like, you know. But apparently what they done was they mixed it down so that it's actually incorporated into the last dun of the three dun duns.
Yeah. It's a good thing these mics are more sensitive, otherwise we'd have to like do similar.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
But yeah, I think their music is a bit more intentional, a bit more measured.
We all know a fart's never intentional.
Well, we know people that would differ.
Oh, yeah, true.
But yeah, so this album, I'd say, draws its name from a lyric on the soundtrack of that Ganja and Hess film. And I think that kind of epitomizes what they're going for with this album. It's kind of marriage of thematic of like ghost stories, horror, sort of like African American, American sort of themes. Like I think there's a song about themes of police brutality and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm just gonna I would call it a review, but who am I to review
the great works of other people?
The great works of talented people. So we'll talk about more first impressions, what I thought, my opinion. God damn it, can't take that away from me.
No.
And
I was gonna say, right, how many tracks are on it?
We have 14 tracks altogether. I'm not gonna go through each. Well, if you want me to go through each one, I'll go through each one. I mean, the last track's 20 minutes long, so that could be like
holy god.
But no, I think the album splits roughly.
Barely last 20 minutes.
Huh?
What?
The album splits broadly into, say, three distinct sections. So it opens with, it has this intro track. It opens with an intro track, kind of sets the pace. David Diggs has these fiery electric lyrics. There's garbled audio. There's a lot of ambient sounds, and these airy lyrics really create this vibe that something's chasing you and you don't know what it is.
Right.
I listened to this song on the way home actually. I was late out of work,
really dedicated to your job and such things, yeah.
And I wasn't leaving the bar or anything like that. And it was dark, and I was walking home, and just some of the ambient sounds and some of the tracks in this.
Tweaky.
Yeah, you're like, is that on the song?
is that the water that's alongside me, or what's it?
And it's like, it gives you this vibe like something's chasing you, but don't really know what it is.
The taxman.
Another highlight track is "He Dead." It's the spin on police brutality. It's called "He Dead." Yes, Jack.
Right.
Because he did.
Sorry, I'm not.
In fact, the hook is literally different. David rapping about stuff that has happened to the narrator, or might happen to the narrator or other characters, and the featured vocalist comes in like, "He did." It's
right.
It's very catchy.
Fair play. Okay.
But essentially, this is about werewolf cops, nearly. chasing and trying to murder the narrator. That's another really interesting thing about the group. They simultaneously don't employ typical tropes of hip hop, not necessarily rejecting them, but twisting them in a certain way to suit their own needs. So, for example, there's very little first person, as in narration, as in, you know, telling them about their own lives. These nearly episodes, which works so well, I think, with the horror sort of gimmick of this album.
Right.
In that it's like these small. Their previous album, Splendor and Misery, was also a concept album. It was like a sci-fi colony sort of thing.
Right.
But it was more cohesive and told maybe a larger narrative, whereas this is more just vignettes nearly.
It's just sort of plucked from different spaces, I suppose.
Yeah, so it's just, they all are scary and it's chasing you, but
there's no real chronological order almost. It's different snippets of different, I suppose, times.
And I suppose something else that adds to that is the album has these small interludes throughout that are just maybe a minute and a half long, and it's just something's happening. You're not sure what it is, or who's getting chased, or who's the bad guy, who's the good guy, but it's scary. And it's
like a journey, or like almost like a massive movie soundtrack in one sort of.
Yeah. Which is interesting then that it draws a title from a film.
What about the videos for some of these songs?
Well, so the songs, clipping songs as a whole, are generally very violent or dark, but not in like a, you talk about, I don't want to say generic hip hop because I don't think anybody that is going to be listening thinks that we're of the view, or anybody's of the view that hip hop is, your typical, what it's characterized as aspects of media. But it's not like that. It's not like, it's not like beef music, It's not like saying like, I hate you, Jack, I'm gonna get you.
Yeah.
Put something that rhymes.
I'm gonna get you one way. Sorry.
See, Jack's understanding the hip hop is very but it's more like violent in the sense that this is like a scary story or something's gonna happen. They have a song called Body and Blood from the previous album, which essentially seems to be about this prostitute who is luring men to their death.
Well, do you know what? Like Ed Sheeran's first, hit out song was a song about a prostitute, like so.
Yeah, it might be a cover, I don't know.
It could be anything,
And I suppose.
Or what do you call that serial killer that she was a prostitute and she used to kill lorry men?
Oh, I don't know.
What's her name? The name's gonna escape me. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm sure if you type into some true crime YouTube channel, you'll find it.
Yeah, it'll definitely pop up. Like.
But so their videos are sort of abstract usually. For example, another very good song on this album is called "Blood of the Fang," which is probably where. We talk about the album in 3 phases. The first, say, 11 tracks are like a real sprint. They're hectic. In fact, before we talk about Blood of the Fang, one of my favourite songs in the album is called Nothing Is Safe.
Right.
Which I originally listened to and interpreted as a family or friends, sitting in their flat, all going, and then somebody breaks in.
That's like in a university house, nothing is safe.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like,
big label, your red sauce.
Lock the drinks cupboard.
And then somebody breaks in and tries to get them. But on further listening, I get more the vibe that it's about, say, this sort of like a house that has like a meth lab or like a crack den, something where that somewhere a bit illicit, and then a police raid comes in.
Right.
Maybe it's just a normal house and a police raid comes in, and it's just got this real. The beat's very like dun, 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 and it just builds and builds. It gives you this real sense of paranoia and tension, so that when the final verse comes around, there's this explosion of like chaos and violence, and it's like. In your head nearly. Like,
okay. Real build up attention. It's almost like you're running like really quickly. Almost like you can imagine, what do you call it when a director's used it? Where you see the episode of Always Sunny in Charlie Work where they follow Charlie as if almost like a first person, like the camera follows him all about. It's a continuous loop. It's like done usually in one set. I can imagine that music video. I obviously haven't seen it, but I can imagine it'd be something like that where it like follows the breaking into the house and then follows almost a scattering or a running, a chasing almost.
It is, yeah. So it's I think it's my favourite track of the album so far. And I think I would recommend anyone out there who, because as I say, it's very experimental kind of stuff, elements of noise music, elements of a genre I didn't know existed called Horrorcore, which is essentially...
Is that a weird category in Pornhub?
I came across yet, but it's very technical, well-produced, produced music that has themes of horror and violence in it.
Right.
And as we've said, this album has those themes.
Yeah.
And it ties in with the noise music aspect. The music is very meticulously produced. And David Diggs, his lyrics throughout are also very meticulous in the sense that they're very measured, and he has a very distinct, some would say mechanical flow, but I like his flow. It works with what they're trying to do with this music, and it works with kind of machine-like production nearly of the music.
Okay.
Even his lyrics are very, very deliberate. They're very fast and very measured, but they're also full of references to other hip-hop artists, to horror films and stuff like that, but also he borrows the flow from other songs and stuff like that, and it's very much an album that would reward multiple listens. But I look back to Blood of the Fang. Blood of the Fang Well, I would recommend, first of all, Nothing is Safe and Blood of the Fang. If you want to get a vibe for what this album is,
Those are the two tracks. Okay.
See what those are.
Are they the singles off the album?
They're the first two singles. They released a new music video for another song, He Dead, or for the He Dead song there recently. Or no, sorry, for All in Your Head, which is also very good, a very intense song. But Blood of the Fang is very good. It's a bit of a slower song. It's probably where the album enters that second section I talked about.
Right.
You know, it's been a sprint now for these first 11 tracks. He Dead, Nothing is Safe. Another very good song in there called Club Down, which has a hook that shouldn't be as catchy given the song sounds.
Given what's going on, the bloody tune, like.
But listen to that and check that out, Club Down. But the second phase then starts with Blood of the Fang, and it's a bit more slower, but it's still just it works. It's one of those albums that works as you listen to it all through. Right. Because you've got now this sense of paranoia, this sense of dread, right? But now for these next, I think it's 4 tracks, it's
the thing that's been chasing you almost in the album has finally caught you.
Or like, you know that bit in the film where they think they're safe but they don't know where it is.
Yeah.
The monster's not dead, the monster's not been stopped, but they can't see it anymore.
Okay.
Everything got the sense of unease, the sense of uncertainty. And when I think these next 4 tracks maybe aren't as strong as the first 10 or 11, they're still very, very good. They have a song, as I said, Blood of the Fangs in there, but they have a song in there called Story 7, which I think you'll find this very interesting. Right. So throughout Clipping's releases, they have had, I think it's they have a song called Story, then Story 3, 4, 5, and now 7. These songs are 1.5 minutes to about 3 minutes long, or a little longer. And there's usually, in terms of what some of their other songs have, are a relatively simple beat, but tell these short episodic narratives, right? So for example, Story 3 tells the story of a guy works in a bar, is heading home, implies about some aspects of his past life, maybe as some kind of serial arsonist for a criminal organisation.
As you do.
And how this comes back to bite him.
Right.
But again...
Or burn him.
No spoilers. But if you go back then and listen to that and the other story songs, they seem to link. There's recurring characters, there's recurring themes, there's recurring...
Like it's the same person.
Like it's in a shared world.
Universe almost. Okay.
So that was why I was very excited for Story 7, because I love anything that has mystery and not conspiracy theory, but like a theory of how do these connect. Right. But and Story 7 was very good, but just wasn't as intriguing as the rest. But it really cements that sense of unease, because it is again a story. I'm not spoiling what it's about, but it's like the others, a lot of the other story tracks in the previous albums. It's a song that you think it's one thing, the story is, and you think the narrative is something, and then it seems to shift very substantially, and you're like, oh, okay, and it just leaves you uneasy on your feet. But no, that second part of the album still very the roots of this horrorcore stuff we talk about in those themes, but is a bit more uneasy, a bit more focused on the dread and the violence and the chaos. Right. We'll talk about the last track because I think I'd like to hear your opinion. Okay, so the
last track is called, Sean, Piano Burning.
Piano Burning.
Right.
What do you think the song is?
What I think the song is? Well, I imagine it's somebody, I don't know, rocking it out on a piano. No, actually, sorry, I'm completely wrong, right? It starts with a beautiful crackling of a fire. And it's set in a lovely Christmas setting. Christmas tree in the corner, stockings on the mantelpiece. Bing Crosby, David Bowie, Dawn a piano.
This is not a cover. So this is essentially, well, it is a cover actually, technically. So this is a composition by a lady called Anya Greenwood. Okay. I believe her name is Anya Lockwood. Apologies. Which is essentially, this is a composition, and we're probably going to get a lot of flack for this, Jack. Right. Maybe you'll disagree with me.
Go on.
I'm not saying I don't get it, but I don't get it. Right? It's I think it works thematically. Maybe you could. We'll tell you what this is.
We're doing a podcast, Sean. My name's Jack Donnelly. Yours is Sean Hughes.
So Anya Lockwood. I've done it again, haven't I?
No, your name
is Lockwood. I've got a lot of notes on this album. Jack's made me limit them. And essentially, this composition, I know there's an audio format, but I'm doing air quotes, is very specific instructions on how you should burn an upright piano, and that is the performance. People then sit and watch the piano burn. In some instances, I watch videos of it on YouTube, and in some instances the strings snap and it sounds a bit like dum dum dum. You know, in the piano where the keys like boom.
Oh, okay, right.
But it doesn't. I don't think it works as well as you think it works in your head. If you go watch the videos on YouTube, we'll link one of the videos on YouTube, and you can see what I mean. We'll link some of that tracks actually on YouTube as well. We'll talk about like Blood of the Fang. But as a whole, I get what they're going for. I think I get what they're going for. Right. That sums up the whole album. I think I get it. Yeah. It's really good, but the last track is just this audio of piano burning, and it's essentially, I think maybe they're going for like, is this like the music itself being killed off at the end of the movie, at the end of the horror movie? Is this like the slow pan out at the end of like a slasher film, an 80s slasher movie, as we think we've survived, but it's still a bit sinister? You hear the fire burning. So it's intriguing, and the album as a whole is very, very intriguing.
Right, I have questions.
Sure.
Okay, number one, is the piano, do you know, used, or like piano used throughout any of the other 13 tracks in the album? Right, there's number one. Number two, there's something in my head saying that I have heard that or seen like a piano like burning somewhere before, and of the strings like snapping, right? Do they snap to a song, or is it random?
I think it's random, because as far from listening to the track, and then as far as I can tell from researching it, the composition in quotes is very specific instructions. It has to be a piano that's beyond use but isn't completely destroyed. It has to be not a grand piano, an upright piano.
Okay.
And you have to burn it in a very certain way, like shove paper in a certain bit and light the paper and all this. So that is
what is with the detailed instructions of burning a piano?
That is the composition, I think. You have to burn it in a very specific way.
Okay.
So yeah, there are videos up on YouTube. We'll link some of those on Facebook and you can have a look. But it's an interesting end to a very, very interesting album. And I'm not saying I don't want it to come across that I'm writing the album off or that I think the end's weird. I enjoy it. It reminds me, as I'm sure some people listening will love to hear me mention, it reminds me of Twin Peaks in a way. Okay. In that it's an album that opens a lot of questions but doesn't give all the answers, which I think is good for any piece of media, because it leaves you, as soon as like,
leaves you guessing, asking questions. It creates a fan lore thing almost.
Like as soon as Game of Thrones finishes and you have all your answers, you're like, okay, I'm not going to think about Game of Thrones anymore. But this album is like, it gets in your head, both because of the nature of it and just the meticulous nature of the music and stuff and the themes, but also just the fact you have some questions about what does that mean, or what is that trying to get at, or where is that a reference to. It's an album that really, really, really rewards repeat listens. You could argue, as I say, clipping their music as a whole is usually very dark and chaotic and vicious, but this album, some people could argue, especially as it winds down, could be seen as maybe a bit bloodless. Some of the
no pun intended, I suppose.
Some of the earlier tracks are absolutely in line with what you'd expect from them, i.e. All in Your Head, the one I really like, Nothing Is Safe. You know, they're vicious, they're intense, but some of the, I suppose the track winds down, you could argue maybe it doesn't have the edge they should have, and is that because maybe you expect it to be a bit more edgier than their usual stuff because it's this horror gimmick? But no, would highly recommend. If I had to rate it out of 5 stars, it would be like 4.5, 4 stars. Very good album.
Okay.
It might be, as I say, it's an album I think deserves more than one listen. It's very interesting, but highly recommend seek them out. I think their Twitter is It's Clipping Bitch. So
I like.
And see what you think. I liked it. I think you'd like it. Although I'd be curious what you think of that second half and how it concludes. But as a whole, I wonder if something I think you would find more intriguing about it is how the music was produced, the noise side of the music and the noise artistry. I think the two guys that actually do the production for the music call themselves noise artists. Right. As a whole, I like the album. That is my sign off. Jack, you have some thoughts on noise artists, is what I'm trying to say.
So it's not even supposed to noise artists, but this is like using different sounds in song, right? Yeah. So I was,
as we alluded to earlier with the Backstreet Boys part.
So the reason, funny enough, when you mentioned this last week, right, or a few weeks ago when we were chatting about this, it brought me to a song that I seen recently. The song is by, so I've thought about a few wee different things actually, but the song is by Fred, or he's also known as Fred Again, right? He's a singer, songwriter, producer, and he's worked on.
Also known by Fred Again, as in.
Yeah. So it's Fred, and then stop, and then he's also known as Fred Again. Okay, so he's worked with like all like the massive artists of our day, well, not of our day, but of current, I suppose. He's worked with Ellie Goulding in her song Around You, Charlie XCX, After the After Party, worked with Steph Long Dawn, he's worked with George Ezra on Shotgun, and he has very recently worked with Ed Sheeran and Stormzy on Take Me Back to London. Right, so he works on all these sort of things, but he has a recent song. What he's done, right, and I think this is really, really interesting, right? There's a lady called and I'm going to pronounce the second name wrong, as I usually do with names, Julie Adengua. I don't know. I think that's one. Anyway, she is. You've heard the rapper Skepta. Okay, so if anybody hasn't heard of Skepta, you've been living under a bleeding rock. But he has songs like Energy, Stay Far Away, or Bet or Shutdown. That is Skepta's sister, right? She put up an Insta story, and the Insta story was just of her singing, right? And the quality isn't great, right? But what
critique?
No, but the audio isn't great. But the song, her voice is good, but the audio isn't great. And Fred has taken that track, and he's created a song called Julie Stay. or it's just called Julie. Her name's Julie, so it's Julie and then brackets stay, and it's a really, really good tune. It's not hasn't been released yet to my knowledge. It's on YouTube. I would highly recommend anybody go and listen to it. But what it does is it takes in like her singing at the start and a little bit muffled. So I heard an interview with him recently, and what he does is, on a night out, you take like stupid videos, stupid audio recordings and such things, silly like sounds that have happened. What he does is he goes through his phone after a weekend and a night out, or weekend or night out, and picks out different things, different videos and sounds from different videos and silly things. So that could be, you eating a bag of chips, or it could be a glass dropping, or it could be me falling downstairs. It could be anything. And wee funny sounds, and puts them into music. But then after I was looking at that, right, so I thought that was pretty really quirky and interesting. I was thinking about all the other like artists through time that we've heard, like, especially like different sounds have used for effects, so even animal sounds, right? So we look at the Beach Boys, right? They have a song off there. It's the final track on Pet Sounds, their 1966 album.
I was going to say, I don't know what this trivia is, but for a second I was going to be like, yes, the Beach Boys have an album called Pet Sounds, so I assume that's just an album, Pet Sounds, and the jacket doesn't know anything. Thankfully, there's more to this. There is.
It's the 1966 album. There's a song called Caroline No, and it was the first single off the album, right? Other singles will include Sloop John B, Wouldn't It Be Nice, and God Only Knows. Right? So, like, three of the Beach Boys songs ever. Not to say I'm not a fan of Caroline, no, but it's like a lamenting song highlighting loss, innocence, such things. The reason why I'm talking about it is at the end of the song, it does the noise of like a train shooting past, or a train passing, almost like you're standing on a platform and the train's left without you. Okay. And then a dog barking in the background brings in this eerie sort of sound, right? Yeah. So maybe start thinking about other songs and other albums that had introduced the likes of animals, right? We look at the Beatles. On the White Album, they have a song Piggies, written by George Harrison, and it's like a social commentary on sort of like greed, consumerism, such things. It's very, how do you put it? Is it Orwellian? Is Orwellian a word?
Yeah, Animal Farm-esque.
Yeah, very, very Animal Farm-esque. Just, just really like, putting a highlight on like greed and consumerism and such things. And there's a lot of pigs snorting. And again, very, very big tie into Animal Farm, of course. But the funny thing, again, when I was just reading around about this, we've all know, we mentioned a bit of serial killer earlier, your woman, whatever her name is. We all have heard of Charles Manson, right? And this loops also back into the Beach Boys. Charles Manson, there's a line in this song Piggies, and it's called "What They Need Is a Damn Good Whacking." Right? And Manson said he used the song, and specifically this line, as a foundation for his helter-skelter theory. Race wars, between blacks and whites and such things. And the funny thing is, he himself never actually done any of these killings, but he says that there were hidden messages instructing him to kill. He never done any. Do you know what I mean? There's an irony there in that. But when you link back to the Beach Boys, you know this as well about. So he fell in with the Beach Boys, specifically Dennis Wilson.
Charles Manson did.
Charles Manson.
Never heard of it.
You ever heard of this? No. So he fell in with the Beach Boys. I think I originally seen it in like a recent documentary that came out, and then we were reading around this. It re-brought the memory to my head. And he gave them a song, right? And in this song, you want to talk about something that is like dark as ever. It's called "Cease to Exist." Right? The Beach Boys were like, no, we're not going to have that. They changed it to "Never Learn Not to Leave." Not to love. Never learn not to love. And it brings it a little bit more. It's not as dark and as eerie and as, linked with death and such things, but what do you call it? As you can well imagine, Manson did not get the credit for that song. But
so did he? What part of the music? What did he write the song?
He wrote the song. Yeah, he gave it to Dennis Wilson. Yeah.
Oh right.
Yeah,
and they released it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was mad.
Bit crazy, all right. Like, but
yes, yeah, like weird origins of music. That is crazy.
Very much so. But the reason that brought that in is because he was really taken in by the Beatles. Big massive fan of the Beatles, Manson was. But it also, we're talking the Beatles, a Beatles song that you particularly love, actually. Sean remember showing me this video one time. There's a blackbird singing in the dead of.
Oh yeah, no.
It is a sad video. Beatles have a song called Blackbird. You can hear birds chirping and such in it. Sean showed me a video of it one time with like emotive stuff happening in the video. And how was my reaction, Sean?
It wasn't ideal. It was not ideal.
No.
It was not. It was just not ideal. Jack keeps up his reputation as being. I think he's secretly a robot. He doesn't have emotions.
Yeah, that's also, but another like animal noises that are used well in music. The Beatles also have "Tomorrow Never Knows," which features seagulls. They have "Good Morning, Good Morning," the Sgt. Pepper, written by John Lennon. There's a rooster at the start. There's a cow in it. There's a duck. There's birds. There's sheep. There's an elephant. There's also a fox hunt in it. Right. As well. All a little bit mad.
Pink Floyd, what do you call it, Money would come into this?
Yeah, very, very much so. The clocks and Money.
It's suppose you could argue maybe the stuff like what clipping do, or like an evolution in that, you know, where it's not necessarily a direct sample. They like take the sound of something and like twist it into what they need it to be, what they want it to be.
Well, it's funny that it's things that associations. So in Good Morning, like they're going for very much like a farmyard vibe there, right? And you can hear the farmyard animals in it. But you look at like a song that came out very recently, well, not very recently, but it's in the recent past, the Nicki Minaj song Anaconda, right? So Anaconda is a bit of snake, right?
Yes.
As you, a really big snake. But there's a noise in it. Have you ever heard you've heard the song Anaconda, right? So there's a noise in it, and it's by the loon. You ever heard of a loon? So a loon is a bird, right? A bird, it's something out of a bloody Alfred Hitchcock film, right? It's red eyes. It's a red-eyed bird that can be found around lakes in North America, and has a very eerie call. I think the irony is that the song's metaphorically about a snake. Hence the metaphor. or I really, puts the metaphorical snake.
Metaphorical snake.
Doof. But yeah, so sort of
Jack's hitting his snake.
Yeah. But yeah, I just thought there was a lot of strange ways that people have used, sound to make you feel like you're almost there. Do you know what I mean?
Like we talked about, I think when you talked about recently, well, not music, Blind Boy has been doing some of his podcasts, it's like outdoor sort of podcast.
Oh yes.
He did one in Chicago, I think.
In the city of Chicago.
That's not that. And you could hear like people going about the business on the outside. It was kind of like an ASMR sort of sample and stuff. But yeah, I suppose it's something people always want to do, because obviously music and different audio things are meant to like create a different, nearly like a different reality to escape into. So I suppose that kind of helps with that sort of idea of creating another reality. It's funny. Just before we wrap this bit up, I saw a band, Anamanaguchi, in McHughes a few years ago, and they're what are called like it's like glitch music, chiptune, Nintendo code.
I remember you telling me about this, yeah.
And so
God, that wasn't there yesterday. Holy shit.
And a lot of their music is made by, it's mostly instrumental stuff, but a lot of their music is made by what sounds they can force old video game systems. So for example, when you go see a DJ and you see him like, them like boards, I don't know what it's called.
Like a soundboard?
Yeah, where they have the little soft things, you hit them and make noise.
Yeah.
A board that makes sounds, a soundboard. But so they were sitting vibing away. Those guys playing guitar and like loop pedals and all, and running through synths and stuff. But then when the lead guy would be dancing about, and then he would say, we have to sit next to loop, so we would lift down and lift this like old Game Boy.
Oh no way!
Hooked into all the systems, and he would just pound out certain things on it. He wasn't playing a game.
He was pounding out on stage.
Oh yeah. They'd clearly hacked it in some way or whatever to make it work. And he was like, hitting a certain button, and it was then setting up this loop, and he was working it against the loop. That was mad.
Right.
So I suppose that maybe the natural evolution. We start with these direct samples of like birds and foxes and stuff that you say, tills and money, and then we move toward what clipping are doing at the minute with like twisting the sounds, and then at some point does this branch off into its own thing where we force machines nearly like instruments, twist them to give sounds rather than twisting pre-existing sounds.
I get you. Yeah.
It's a very interesting evolution. There's a larger discussion maybe we'll have another day.
It is the beautiful way that people use music. Use sound.
The beautiful way we're not talented enough to.
It is indeed. Well, look, folks. Yes, we just had a very great review of the album. What was the album called again, Sean?
There Existed an Addiction to Blood by Clipping.
Clipping. You would highly recommend?
I would highly recommend seeking it out. It's on Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, etc. You can get it really cool vinyl. It looks like it's splattered with blood.
Oh, okay.
Get that in like make sure that's not on a see-through box when it comes in the post.
No. That's gonna be questionable anyway. Okay, right, folks. We will be right back after these messages. So coming up next is one of the greatest comebacks in, I suppose, pop culture history, if not the world. I'm not talking about Ali being allowed back to box again after his refusal to be drafted in the Vietnam War, nor am I talking about the time Sean drank his body weight in Jameson, fell asleep before he could go out for his own 21st birthday party, and still was the last man standing in the bar at 2 o'clock. This particular comeback was birthed from the flames of the Human Torch and has culminated Thanos' snap heard around the world at the box office. I am of course talking about Marvel. And no, I'm not talking about the feeling that most people feel when they meet me.
the feeling when you leave. The feeling.
Very funny, Sean.
When the restraining orders finally signed up.
So, Sean, Marvel, it's a massive thing. We're going to be chatting today about, you know, like I said, rise, fall, and rise again. Mm-hmm. Chat to me.
So, we're going to talk about Marvel Comics, Marvel Studios, commonly referred to as the House of Ideas, how they went from a small-time comic publication called, I think, Timely Publications in the 60s to this absolute media juggernaut in all forms now in the current time, and the in-between, especially a period in the late 90s, or mid-late 90s, where they were on the brink of total collapse, and how, as you say, the rise and fall and rise again of this absolute behemoth. So I suppose you would, as with any story, you would start at start.
Yes.
So in the 80 years ago this year, 1939, the company that would become Marvel Comics was formed. It was a sort of pulp comic, you know, it wasn't strictly superheroes at the start. It was just large characters, stories. Two of their first original characters were the Human Torch and Namor, the Submariner. An Aquaman sort of type. Aquaman before Aquaman was cool and sexy like Jason Momoa.
Oh, okay. The Submariner had lots of muscles though, didn't he?
Oh yeah.
You could, like, you know, what is it to say? You could, like, do his washing on his, or do your washing on his chest,
abs.
like on his abs.
But yeah, the Human Torch. This was a Human Torch that isn't the one played by Chris Evans in the Fantastic Four. Terrible Fantastic Four film.
Chris Evans?
Yeah. Not the ginger one.
I was like, I know his hair's on fire, like much like my own, but holy God.
The one, the Captain America one.
Oh, okay.
But it's not Captain America, spoilers. So these were the sort of the first two characters that would set the stage for what Marvel would become. The move into the 50s and the post-war comic market was very much, you know, Marvel had dabbled in other superheroes. These were two of their biggest ones that are still in some form in continuity and in the universe today.
Sean, quick question from somebody that isn't a superhero fan. When you say just come out of the war, and just very, very briefly, when did Captain America come into it?
So, Captain America came into it pretty much as...
Quick digression, folks.
A rising out of the war. Like, one of the first, most famous comic book covers is Captain America punching Hitler in the face.
Fantastic.
From like around the time, I don't know the exact year, but it wasn't like years later.
Was this propaganda put out by the US government?
No, this was an official. Well, I don't know, but it was an official Marvel comic. It wasn't like a poster. It was.
Oh, it was an actual thing. Okay,
yeah.
Right.
Hitler exists in Marvel continuity. He is like.
I didn't know what you were going to say. I was like.
But yeah, so at the post-war market, Marvel had dabbled in superheroes and stuff, but they were still kind of hadn't really become this superhero-focused thing that they would later become. And then in the 50s, the superheroes fell out of fashion, and the company that would become Marvel, I think now they took on the name Atlas Comics for a while, published everything: horror, westerns, adventure books, monster books, crime, war comics, you name it, it was there. Romance. And it was, they hit on popular trends, and they published comics that, you know, people will have heard of. For example, they had their own, well, maybe not have heard of, but have heard of what it's based on. You've heard of Casper the Friendly Ghost?
Oh yes, I love Casper.
They had Homer the Happy Ghost.
Like, Homer, the happiest ghost of Moe's.
And it was around 53 to 54. A little guy, not a little guy, but a man you may have heard of called Stan Lee, along with John
his glorious moustache.
His glorious moustache. You see, they had a tribute to Stan Lee at New York Comic Con.
Right.
And some of the actors who played the characters came dressed as the characters.
Oh,
that was really cool.
Pretty sweet.
But yeah, so Stan Lee and John Romita Sr., one of the godfathers of like comic book artists, tried unsuccessfully to revive the sort of superheroes that had, you know, the Submariner, Human Torch, and Captain America, and didn't really work. And that was kind of it for a while. Then, in the 60s, we have skipped about 30 years here, folks, but this is where
this is
the
where
stuff
we're going.
After it.
The 60s, I suppose, wasn't it though, Sean, that like fan communities were forming, and like there was comic book stores opening all over the place, and people were realising there's coin to be made here, like.
Well, essentially what happened was in the early 60s, DC kind of revived a lot of their superheroes, like Batman, I think, is 90 years old this year,
right?
So he's pretty old, getting up there.
Almost, you know, at this stage of the game, he would be going blind like a bat.
You'd have to use a sonar.
Do you know what I mean?
And they would successfully, towards the end of the 50s, early 60s, DC would revive a lot of their heroes. The Flash, Green Lantern, Batman, Superman. And the Justice League of America as a whole would begin to like take shape in its modern incarnation. And so in 61, Stan Lee, who was now one of the editors of the company, introduced his idea of superheroes that were designed to appeal to older readers more rather than the predominantly child audiences that had been pitched at before.
Right.
Because, for example, again, I know we're talking about Marvel, but to relate to DC, you know the Batman show from the 60s always gets a lot of flack for being very...
Oh, Qual, I love that show.
But very, like...
It's just Sundays for me, like...
You ever see the film?
I've never seen the film.
The film's ludicrous. The gadgets he has like bat shark repellent spray.
Right.
And there's a big rubber shark in his leg and he just sprays it. It's like, ah.
I was going to say, yeah, because like the spray would work underwater, of course, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And Stan Lee would take his slant on this on superheroes, and this essentially is what is seen as what set Marvel apart and just strapped the rocket to them to become the other side of the big two in terms of comics today. This happened with the publication of Fantastic Four #1 in November 1961, and we had what is known as the first family of Marvel Comics, the Fantastic Four, Human Torch, not the same Human Torch. This is the Human Torch who Chris Evans did play, again, not that one. And what made them different from the DC characters was DC characters still today largely are presented as larger than life, nearly mythologized.
Right.
And the Marvel characters were presented as human. You know, they fell out with each other, had squabbles, had rows. You know, Peter Parker always had to pay his bills or had like romance issues.
They had things that like the readers could relate to.
You know? They were not problematic, flawed. They were flawed.
Flawed heroes sort of thing.
And so essentially this is what set them apart, and this just rocketed them up. So you talk about when you read something, when you read any story, you want to relate to that character. You know, I can't relate to Bruce Wayne, the billionaire playboy philanthropist who essentially, you know, when you break down Batman, right, he's a rich guy that dresses up in a rubber suit and goes out at night and beats up poor people. Like, when you break it down like that,
he's into some really weird S&M sort of
sort
of stuff. Like,
I love a bit of Batman, I do, but I'm just saying. So Marvel then also took it into, similarly to what they did with the characters, they took it into like real world things. So in DC Comics, real world didn't come into it, but in Marvel Comics, you know, the Red Scare factored in. Right. The Punisher had served in Vietnam, for example.
Okay.
Captain America had served in World War II. He punched Hitler, as we said. And
wouldn't we all have to do that?
And all of these sort of, what I think is a really good example of how it struck a chord with people. You know, the magazine Esquire, in 1965 they published a list of 28 college campus heroes. Right. Like, you know, icons for the student generation and all.
Okay.
And on that list was John F. Kennedy, Bob Dylan, Spider-Man and the Hulk. So
you can imagine that dinner party.
You know, I would fully believe Hulk has a better singing voice than Bob Dylan these days.
Oh, Sean, get away with you.
So Marvel then just spun this out massively and publish all these other books: Hulk, Thor, Ant-Man, Iron Man, everything. And we essentially have the beginnings of a comic universe that has remained consistent since then, since the 60s. Okay. And we're gonna deep dive here, little folks, in terms of comic book stuff.
Not just it's like the Submariner.
So comics typically, like every year, the big two companies, Marvel and DC, will have at least one huge event, summer event. You know, every book ties into it. Every book's affected. It's like, who lives, who dies. Okay. You know, and
the end of the world.
Or it's usually the universe, you know.
Okay.
Because once you raise those stakes to the universe, you can't really. You just have to. It has to always be the universe.
Yeah, even though we still don't know if there's all people out there. Like.
Yeah. So DC essentially have not play fast and loose for continuity, but because their characters aren't as grounded and human, they shuffle their continuity around every few years. I think they reboot their universe and then reset essentially. Right. So certain characters that are dead are now back. Some characters are older or younger. But Marvel, they've done that. I think DC have done that, for example, in the last, since 2000, 1, 2, 3, at least 3, maybe 4 times. Right. Whereas Marvel have done it only properly once in their whole history. Okay. 4 years ago. And so I think it speaks to the longevity of these characters, and when you make them relatable, how they can persist and last. So essentially Marvel are riding high then, for the 70s and 80s, non-comic readers. Well,
you see, I've got a question just about the 70s and 80s, right? When we were chatting about this and reading around this, there seemed to be a big thing, like there was loads of people going for comics, and I was reading as well, just like sort of what the trajectory of where Marvel were going with this. There seem to be people collecting comics at this stage, Sean, for investment, so college funds, pensions, retirements, and then obviously Marvel jumped into this. We're like, yes, look, we can sell loads, so alternative covers, special editions, spin-off issues, and like people were buying them to save them to sell them on later. Did collector fatigue set in after Marvel had sort of flooded the market with so much content?
Yeah, so what essentially happens, the 70s and 80s, there's a coasting period where Marvel, the industry as a whole, is riding high. You have essentially characters that have clearly were inspired in a lot of ways because the majority of them have endured today. Like, I think Spider-Man is nearly 900 issues now.
Right. And
so, like, these comics endure. These characters were, as they talk about different ages in comic books. I think the 50s and the 60s, maybe it's the 60s, the 50s and the 60s, I think the 60s are called the Golden Age, and then Silver Age, Bronze Age, all the way up to the Modern Age. And these characters were inspired. So Marvel, the industry in Marvel coasted for a while. Everything was great. We were selling a huge amount of issues. It was all good stuff. But then, as you say, essentially it was a wee bit of greed, you could say, because then as we move toward the 80s, the big events start to happen, right? So Marvel and everybody starts doing these things. So 1985, DC did an event called Crisis on Infinite Earths,
right,
where all of reality was at threat, right?
Okay.
They killed Supergirl. Spoilers for a 35-year-old comic.
No, not Supergirl.
The Flash died, the first Flash. And people and these comics sold huge issues because people are like, oh my god, this character. Even people who didn't read comics, they were like, these are the characters from my youth, or these are
sold hearts of these sort of massive things.
And so then this is kind of the start of this, as you say, people selling and buying comics as investments. People see, oh, there might be money in this, and they talk about a speculator boom. So then people, towards the late 80s, especially into the 90s, it was a huge issue in the 90s. They start doing every other week is a new issue or a new number one or the debut of the next big Marvel character or the death of the next big Marvel character.
Right.
Like, who died in the 90s? Superman was killed in the 90s. The other Flash was killed in the 90s. Green Lantern was killed in the 90s. The Spider-Man, they did this thing called the Clone Saga, which was originally, we did hear this for a very interesting idea. I always think this is mad. So the plan was, there was a story from the 60s where a clone of Peter Parker is made and they beat him and that's that.
Right.
But Marvel essentially decided Peter Parker wasn't relatable anymore because he was married and stuff.
Okay.
So they were going to turn around and say, no, the Peter Parker you've been reading for the last 30 years is that clone. The real Peter Parker is actually like frozen or something, and here he is again without a wife.
And he's still a younger man then.
And he can restart and be relatable and stuff.
Right.
But essentially what happened was they started to write the story, and obviously comics are published monthly, and then they're like, people are really buying these issues. Let's like stretch it out. But then they're like, no, we don't want to do this anymore. So it was meant to be like, I think a 6-issue story turned into a 3-year-long saga.
Fuck.
Across about
Jesus Christ
40, 50 plus issues and about 4 different series, and it ruined Spider-Man books. But what, as you say, what happened throughout it was every other week it was like this new character or this new number one. So then comics started to sell for more and more money. And I think I can't remember the year, but like, for example, I've got some numbers here in front of me of comics that have sold for huge amounts. Like the first appearance of Spider-Man, right, in Amazing Fantasy 15.
What year now? Sorry with this one.
So this is the most recent one that it sold for is in 2011. This was for is that $1 billion? No, it's 1 million. It's 1,100,000. 1.1 million.
What?
For
an issue of a comic?
First appearance of Spider-Man.
It's funny. Very quick digression. They're one of Harry Potter early releases. So I think it was 27,000.
Saw that first edition.
Yeah, and then there's another one I think coming up very recently, if not already sold. They're talking about 30,000. It's been kept like in a cabinet or a thing for like since about out of many years. Like.
But what's happening there is the same thing that you've pointed out with these comics. You have kids who are growing up in the 60s and being like, I love Spider-Man and reading Spider-Man. Those kids grow up and have money.
Yes.
And now they want those comics.
Oh, okay. Nostalgia thing?
Yeah, nostalgia. But then it isn't. I think it's initially a nostalgia thing, but then it bleeds into a collector thing, because then you had people going out and buying these issues that they thought would be worth a huge amount of money. For example, when they killed Robin, or when they brought in a new Spider-Man,
right?
And people were like, I'll buy this in like 1982 and it'll be worth money in like 2000,
yes,
or 2010 or whatever. But because by the time of the 90s it was happening so constantly, and Marvel were playing into it. This comic has 5 different collectible covers, buy them all, and the people are like, buying them and selling them. But this essentially meant that there was the market was artificially inflated.
Okay.
There was people...
It was a bubble then?
Yeah, there were people buying them to read them, but there was people buying them just for the purposes of, to sell them on.
Sell them on.
Investments, as you say.
Yeah.
And essentially, the bottom fell out one day, and Marvel were on the cusp of bankruptcy.
And they had to sell off a lot of stuff, didn't they, Sean? Like, they're big names, like.
Which I think is... What do you talk? There's a saying, I can't think of what it is. Like nearly like lucky in the end, in that. So essentially, Marvel sell off rights to the film rights and the television rights to a number of their most famous characters, including the Fantastic Four, who we've talked about was the foundations upon which this whole huge universe was built. Spider-Man. I think the rights to Spider-Man, who I don't know about you, but I would say Spider-Man is probably the most famous superhero going
in the world.
Definitely, I would say prior to the MCU film starting.
Okay.
I would say he was. Sold him his rights for $7 million, which, given in the context of a big business like that, and in the context of the money they're now making on those films, is peanuts.
Minuscule.
Oh,
okay.
So, and they sold these rights off, and it kept their head above water. They took on a lot of licensing deals and did comics for non-Marvel properties. I think that's actually where the first Star Wars Marvel comics came out of.
Oh, okay.
And essentially they were just keeping their head above water. So this goes on. They kind of find their feet then in the early 2000s. And it's actually funny in that the same sort of cycle that we talked about with these young people growing up and then going back to buy these comics and creating this, not creating, but contributing to this bubble that has caused this. The same thing happens with the writers now, in that a lot of characters who were, say, brought in the 80s and 80s, who were like maybe adults at the time, derided them.
Yeah.
Now those kids have grown up and are writing comic books.
There was a funny thing as well, that when the whole the bubble was growing and growing and growing in like the 70s, there was a lot of people who were, correct me if I'm wrong, were doing drawings for the studios, and they were like, you know what, lads, we can actually go and do this ourselves, make better money. Do you know what I mean? And so there was again that influx of people that were coming into
like a talent thing.
Yeah, pretty much.
So there was also, as you say, this sort of huge influx of talent, and it was not a lost generation, maybe that's a bit much, but like there was definitely a brain drain of talent, because it was so inflated and there were so many people. Because again, this leads to the birth of essentially the independent scene that we have in comics now, from the early 2000s to now, of people like Rob Liefeld and I can't mind his name, the guy that wrote Spawn, Todd McFarlane. They work for Marvel, but then the ass falls out. Marvel are publishing, say, $40 a month, and now we're like, well, no, we're toning this way down. We don't have the money. Okay. And these guys go away and form their own companies. Image Comics, the guys who published Sandman, at Good Omens, or Neil Gaiman, who wrote Good Omens, also wrote some books for them. Right. IDW, or no, not IDW. The Walking Dead, all these sort of independent comics. Yes. There is an argument made that the independent scene that gave these the opportunity to be seen on such a large stage comes from the ass falling out of them. Oh, so it went full circle almost then. Yeah. Okay. And that's what I'm saying. The same thing happens with those authors, and that those authors grow up and bring back all these characters that maybe helped cause that crash, if you know what I mean, and then they become a bigger part of the resurgence. Right. So then we fast forward, say, to the mid 2000s. Marvel, a man called, what's his name, Maisel? David, so yeah, this guy, I was actually reading about this as well. David Maisel, I think, was he the Kingmaker, Sean? I think he came in and, he pits the idea that, like, to us now seems normal, but then obviously it was maybe a wee bit out there, to create their own production studios, maintain creative control and maintain profits for themselves, have the characters cross over in comics, and, like as we know, and as you said, Marvel lost a lot of their iconic characters then at that stage. Yeah, so, like they had to then make use of lesser known characters. Were they the first to do this, or were DC all out doing this? In terms of films? Yeah. So DC weren't, so DC had done obviously the Batman films, Michael Keaton, that terrible one with Mr. Freeze, that Jack loves, goddamn. Fucking love it. And so they've been doing films. Obviously, the rights that Marvel had sold off to Sony and 20th Century Fox became the X-Men films starring Hugh Jackman and the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films. So there were other films being made, but nobody had come up with this idea of a shared universe, and it's one of those things. Well, I think it had been suggested,
because that's a massive thing.
Yeah, I think it had been suggested, but I don't think anybody would ever really give it a go properly, at least with comic book characters.
Right.
Which is funny because it's one of them things. You know, people always talk about the biggest ideas to make the most money are like the most simple. This is what the comics have been doing for years, like especially since they refound their footing after the 90s issues. Every year, you go on any like Wikipedia, if you Google like Marvel summer events, you will see a timeline of the events, and there will be one huge one every year, as I say, where it's like the end of everything or everything changes, or like
the world's falling apart. Like.
Yeah, like, and again, it ties into this idea of flawed characters, whereas a lot of the DC events are reality itself is just dying, we need to save it. A lot of the Marvel events are Civil War, for example, the death of Captain America. They're focused on the heroes themselves, the personalities, and how they clash, which again ties into this relatable and how these characters are just so enduring. But he, as you say, he pitched the idea to Marvel, why don't we fund our own studio with characters we have and make films? But they don't have the flagship characters. They don't have the Fantastic Four. They don't have the X-Men. They don't have Spider-Man. So essentially they take characters who, not B tier, because like Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, they were Avengers, but they just hadn't permeated pop culture the way these others had.
It's funny you should say the word B tier. Some may say B tier, now in the billions tier. So does B mean billions, like, you know what I mean?
Because Iron Man, prior to the film, was largely, he wasn't he's like the lead Avenger. He wasn't that. He wasn't an Avenger. He was a founding member of the Avengers in the comics, but he wasn't this like front man. Yeah,
and now you have now you have in the movies. So there's been, what's been 2 or 3 Iron Mans?
So there's been 3 Iron Mans. There's been something like 24 films now altogether in that cinematic universe.
3 Thors, the third one now coming out in 2021. Iron Man.
Oh no, fourth one. Sorry, fourth.
Oh, fourth one. 3 Captain Americas. Of course, you have the Avengers 2012.
It's ridiculously. It's huge. It's absolute mad. And the comics. It's funny because now you talk about all these different circles within circles and coming full circle. What's happened now in the comics? Films drive people to the comics, right? But now the comics world is restructured to match the film world.
Right.
Characters are now drawn to resemble their film counterparts. Okay. Characters that maybe weren't so prominent, Iron Man, are now front and center in almost every big event, and his books sound so much more than it would prior. So it shapes. Similarly, I think so Marvel now have made a deal where they've got some of those rights back, like the X-Men, and they were just ignoring the X-Men for a long time because they didn't have the rights. So we're not gonna make comics that are gonna
give somebody else loads of money,
I'm gonna read X-Men, then go see this X-Men film, but Marvel aren't getting any money. So essentially what has happened in the space of 20 years, just over 20 years, this company was on the brink of bankruptcy and now is easily the biggest media empire in the world. Disney bought them for a couple of billion, I think. Like the Endgame released the culmination of this whole Infinity Saga, they call it, the first 24 films, is the most profitable film of all time. Overtook Titanic, overtook Avatar. And
I love Titanic.
It's just a complete sorry. Where does Titanic fit in the timeline though? But it's just this complete turnaround, and as you said, one of the greatest comebacks. To talk about the House of Ideas, and it is very much a company that has not compromised. I'm not suggesting anybody's compromised any ideas, but it was very much something built on their own ideas and their own creativity to drive it forward and drive themselves back into the spotlight. And as simplest ideas, because one of the biggest things that has drove the films from strength to strength is the post-credits scenes that they did.
Yeah, so post-credit scenes, it's this is something that it's strange because it seems like it's already finished from the TV screen, and there's always, you see post-credits in anything, cartoons, whatever, there's that wee bit of funniness, there's that wee bit of action, what's coming next? Yeah. And Marvel have obviously used this as a what's coming next sort of thing.
So the first one was in the first film, Iron Man, where you watch this, hour and a half, 2 hour film, Iron Man, and at the end, I think he's sitting in his house and the lights come on and Samuel L. Jackson is Nick Fury, and he says, I want to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative. And anybody who then knew what that meant was like, oh my god, they're going to do this.
Holy shit!
Yeah. So that it's mad, and sometimes, and it's always sometimes it's a bit of crack, sometimes it's a bit of fun. Like everybody's seen that Baby Groot one at the end of the first Guardians with him just dancing. And then other times it's like at the end of the second Avengers, you see Thanos get the gauntlet and decide he's going to come and fuck it up.
It almost creates continuity.
It helps build this universe, and that is what I think. They did it right, because, and then as you asked about DC doing it, DC went straight into it. They did Batman v Superman, then they did Justice League. Suddenly everybody knows each other, everybody's mates. Marvel waited 6 years before they all teamed up. They did 5 years. They did all their separate films and laid them out. then after they all teamed up, it was this living, breathing world. So you had a TV show on where like Thor might show up, or Thor's mate might show up.
Yeah.
Or you'd watch a Thor film and he goes to ask Doctor Strange for help. It's not just, oh look, they're teaming up in this movie. It's organic, you know.
Yeah.
Which makes it feel, again, full circle, ties into the comics. The comics are organic, relatable, you know. So yeah, we're now living in a world where Bradley Cooper voices Raccoon in the most profitable film. That's the other thing. Sorry, that is the one other thing. Marvel clearly know as well. They're super successful because they decided to make a film with a talking raccoon, and they hired Bradley Cooper, who I think is a very, very handsome man. So we're going to hire this very handsome actor, and you're going to voice a raccoon.
Very dashing fellow indeed.
We have a talking tree that sells with 3 words. We're going to pay Vin Diesel a lot of money to say those 3 words. You know, it's like we can do what we want now.
Yeah.
And I think it's very much, we live in this world now. But
it is what it is.
The interesting thing, and I think you mentioned it before we came on, is what's going to happen in the future, because will they be able to maintain this? Because a lot of their people that have been holding this up for so long, the Robert Downey Jr.'s, the Chris Hemsworth, I think Chris Evans are starting to step away. So this new generation of new characters coming in who are B tier. Like, I'm not saying they're C tier, but they're even more.
They're lower down the packing order.
Yeah. And obviously they're going to bring these new ones in that have the rights back to, like X-Men and all, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes. Will there be another slump? There's speculation at the minute the comics are entering another speculator boom, so because like I think there's some issues coming out at the minute that are spiking in price weeks after release to like 30-50 quid.
Right.
For about £4 for comics.
You get a night out in that, for God's sake.
I know. So it'll be interesting to see. We've talked a lot throughout this about stuff coming full circle. Will it come full circle again, and will we see another crash and lull, and maybe years from now we'll see Captain, or maybe years from now it'll just keep going and we'll see Thor 9.
Okay. And maybe years from now me and you'll be back on talking about it coming full circle once again.
And we'll just replay this conversation.
So, like Sean, there's loads to talk about. We will definitely pick up again on this without a doubt. Like, there's stuff to talk about there about the rise of technology and how it helped promote Marvel, of course, geek culture, technology, Google, all those different things. There's also loads to talk about the role of women in Marvel and superhero
I think
things.
Just this week there was talk of an all-women Avengers movie.
Exactly. There's loads to talk about films. There's obviously superhero fatigue, which you've touched on as well. But yeah, so that's pretty much Marvel, rise, fall, and of course rise again.
Well, this is part 1. Maybe, I don't know. If Jack lets me.
No, we'll see. We'll get a lot of pints out of it. See what happens. Okay, right, folks. We will be right back after these messages.
And unfortunately that is us for another week. You've heard about Clipping and their new album, which as I'm sure you can tell I'd highly recommend, our thoughts on the recent Joker film with Joaquin Phoenix, and a brief history of all things Marvel. We've discussed some excellent yet strange music and films this week, but all in all I think it's been a nice eclectic mix of topics. Jack, what do you think?
It was a great show, Sean. I thoroughly enjoyed it. We've run the gambit in terms of topics, definitely. I've learned a lot, and if I've learned anything from Marvel, it means that there is, even coming from their low point, there is hope for us all yet. So folks, check back in another 2 weeks. Yes, we do it bi-weekly because, you know, we want to leave you with a little bit of stuff to think and mull over in your head. So like I said, check back again in 2 weeks, and we'll follow up on our chat about the Joker film. We're going to do like a little bit of history of the character because, you know, the most famous guy. We're also going to be chatting about it's my new favourite genre, folks. It's of music. It's K-pop, yes, and all the culture around it. Sean?
We'll also have a top secret interview for you. Keep an eye on our Facebook page and social media to find out who that is. But until then, please subscribe, review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, like the You Ain't Heard Nothing Yet Facebook page, and keep an eye out for the podcast going up on YouTube soon. Let us know what you think of the show or about anything else you'd like us to discuss.
Yes, folks, if there's anything you'd like us to discuss or talk about, or any critiques or anything, give us a wee bell, let us know, get us on all the social medias. JackieD123, that's my Instagram. You can hit us up on Facebook. My Facebook's not in great form at the moment, it's not working properly, but you can hit Sean up or hit us up with a private message on the Facebook page or comments or whatever you like. Of course, we'll see you again, folks, in 2 weeks. The man with an addiction to blood sitting opposite me is a wild Sean Skews.
And the man who's banned from giving blood in multiple countries sitting across the desk is the elusive Jack Donnelly. And you've been listening to
You Ain't Heard Nothing Yet.